All right, let's jump right into this explainer on federalism. We're going to break down this super important topic, which you'll definitely need for your exams. We'll keep it clear and simple so you have everything you need to feel confident.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big idea, what federalism even is. Then we'll look at how these systems get started. After that, we'll dive deep into India as a case study to see how it all works in the real world, all the way down to giving power back to the people.
Okay, first things first. What is federalism? Let's get a really solid definition locked in.
So let's kick things off with a question that trips a lot of people up. You hear all these terms: union, federal, central government. What's the right one to use for the government in New Delhi? It's a great question, and trust me, by the end of this, you'll know the answer inside and out.
Okay, at its absolute core, federalism is all about dividing power. It's a system where you don't just have one government calling all the shots. Instead, you have at least two levels, or tiers, and each one has its own authority, its own jurisdiction. This is the definition you'll want to have memorized for your exams.
Now, this slide shows a really key distinction you need to grasp. In a federal system, think of the US or India, the central government can't just boss the state governments around. States have their own powers that are protected by the Constitution. But in a unitary system, like the UK, it's the total opposite. Power is held at the center, and any local units are basically just following orders. Getting this difference is a must.
All right, Section 2. So how do countries become federations in the first place? Well, it turns out there's a fork in the road. Two main paths that countries take, and which path they choose tells you a lot about where the power really lies.
And just take a look at this map for a second. Federalism isn't some obscure idea. It's the system used by some of the biggest and most diverse countries on the planet. We're talking Canada, Brazil, Russia, Australia. And even though the total number of federal countries might seem small,
The impact is absolutely massive. Get this, only about 25 of the world's 193 countries are federal, but they are home to an incredible 40% of the entire world's population. That really shows you just how important this way of governing is.
so here are those two paths. First, you have coming together federations. This is when a bunch of independent states decide, you know what, let's team up and form a bigger country, like the original colonies forming the USA. In these systems, the states usually keep a lot of their power. The second path is holding together. This is where a big, diverse country decides to divide its own power up to govern more effectively. In this model, the central government tends to be a bit stronger.
So now, let's put that idea to the test. India is a textbook example of a holding together federation. So let's zoom in and see how that works. Now, this is a fantastic detail to remember for an exam answer. The Indian Constitution actually never uses the word federation. Instead, Article 1 declares India as a union of states. But don't let that fool you. The entire government is built on federal principles, that classic division of power we've been talking about.
So at the very top, you have the union government, which you'll also hear called the central government. It's in charge of things that affect the whole country. We're talking national defense, foreign policy, banking, that kind of stuff. Then you have the second tier, the state governments. They're responsible for the day-to-day running of their own states. So they handle things like local policing, trade, agriculture, and so on.
And here's where Indian federalism gets really unique. There's a third tier of government. This is local government, made up of panchayats in the villages and municipalities in the cities. This third layer is a huge deal, and we're definitely coming back to it in a bit.
Okay, so we've got the theory down. But how does this all work in practice, day to day? Let's dig into how the relationship between the center and the states has actually changed over the years.
This timeline tells a really important story. For a long time, before 1990, the same political party often controlled both the central government and most of the state governments. This meant that, in reality, states didn't always act so independently. But after 1990, things changed. Regional parties became much more powerful, and we entered an era of coalition governments at the center. This forced a new culture of sharing power and respecting the independence of the states, making federalism a lot stronger in practice.
And this brings us to our final and maybe most important section. We're going to circle back to that third tier of government we mentioned earlier. This is all about decentralization, the idea of moving power from the capitals and giving it directly to local people. So what exactly is decentralization? The logic is really simple. There are tons of problems and issues that are best understood and best solved right at the local level. It's about giving people a direct say in their own communities and making democracy something you can see and touch.
Okay, pay really close attention here, because this slide is pure exam gold. A major constitutional amendment in 1992 completely transformed local government. It did 5 huge things. It made regular elections for local governments mandatory. It reserved seats for marginalized communities and, crucially, for women. It set up independent state election commissions, and it forced state governments to share both their power and their money with these new local bodies.
And the result of that 1992 change? It's just mind-boggling. Right now, there are about 3.6 million elected representatives in local governments all across India. To put that in perspective, that number is bigger than the entire population of many countries.
Yeah, because of that incredible scale, this system of local government in India has been called the largest experiment in democracy anywhere in the world. It's a huge step in bringing more voices, especially women's voices, into the political process. So, as you finish your exam prep, here's a final thought to chew on. With 3.6 million elected local leaders, is this the world's greatest ongoing experiment in making democracy deeper and more meaningful? There are still plenty of challenges for sure, but it's a powerful question to think about what this means for the future of democracy, not just in India, but everywhere.